What's up, Shakers? We're here today with the Congressman, Congressman Steve Pearce.
How you doing? Just call me Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
In small states, they don't want to know congressman, they don't want to know a senator or governor. They want to remember that you know where you came from. So I'm just Steve in the state, and I'm Steve up here.
Perfect, Steve. Thanks so much for joining the Handshakin video series. Shakers, we're here today again with the Handshakin sunglasses. Make sure to apply to the Handshakin Pre-accelerator. We want to help you start your business. And even if we don't accept you, we'll give you a free pair of sunglasses. So pick up your sunglasses at the Handshakin Pre-accelerator. And great. So to start us off, Steve, could you tell us a little bit about your background and where you're from?
Well, when I was born, my dad was actually a sharecropper. We were just south of Lubbock, Texas, about 40 miles, just in a little sand pit there. He went broke doing that. Didn't know where he was going, moved across. The truck broke down outside Hobbs, New Mexico. They hitchhiked 3 miles into town. That's where I grew up. He got a job in the oil field. Never moved from that position. But I tell people that he found the success he was looking for. He found 5 acres. He always had aspired to be a farmer. So he had 5 acres. He worked in the oil field during the day, afternoons, evenings, farmed that little 5 acres. It's the 5 acres that put all of us 6 kids through college. So I tell people every day that that's how the free enterprise system works. That 5 acres in the hands of the government, in the hands of a big corporation, big international corporation, would have meant nothing. But to my dad, he was able to use it and work hard, and then got all of us kids working hard, and we made our way up that economic ladder of life, starting just right there from a sharecropper status.
Wow. Beautiful. So did that inspire an entrepreneurial spirit in you?
No, it's the entrepreneurial spirit just came naturally. From at 3, I mean, I literally remember starting to wash dishes, and I made a deal with Mom. She didn't have anything, but she was working at the Mead's Fine Bread Company. And for a quarter a week, I'd wash the dishes. I mean, every night I'd get up there and pull my chair up to the deal. And Friday afternoon, I'd be standing there with my hand out waiting for the quarter. My first job outside the home was at 9. The farmer would come pick me up at 4:30 in the morning. We'd go change irrigation pipe. I would get home in time to go to school at 7, and then after school we'd pick me up and do it again. I tell you what, no matter where I go in life, that first paycheck, when I was 9 years old, when he opened up his little notepad and he added up my hours, and I could see him writing that check. He got this big checkbook like this. He opened it up and wrote my name on the line and put my numbers over there. I wish I had that check today. Of all the awards of everything I've ever gotten in life, that may be the most important, because that said someone valued me for what I could offer them. And that's what really pushed me ahead. But from day one, I had the entrepreneurial spirit. Brothers and sisters grew up in the same situation, didn't necessarily have it.
Wow. So could you tell us the first time you launched a business?
Well, the first thing I had was rabbits, and that was when I was about 10. That was part of a 4-H project. And I learned right away that the rabbits, they just kept producing, and so we'd move the males and the females and separate them because we had too many rabbits and we couldn't sell them as fast as we were getting them. And even when they were separated, somehow we still kept getting baby rabbits. I mean, at 10 years old, I knew enough to know that something's wrong here. And the rabbits just kept exploding. So we finally stopped that first business. We had pigs always in 4-H, and those were what paved our ways through college. But it was keeping those little T-charts, the revenues and expenses, which is burned into my head today, began at 10 years old, just one pig at a time. And we could, especially I would track the numbers and know which pigs were more productive and which were not. And you got to where you didn't do the less productive pigs, you moved to the more productive ones. And that background stayed with me. Even when I was running a complex business, in my head, I'm still doing those simple T-charts. Up here in Congress, I'm still breaking it down to the essentials, because you got to make the essentials work. You can get way too fancy with accounting. Accounting is necessary, it's important, but for me as a business owner, I like to break it down to the simple things. Where does the money come from, and where does it go to, and how much do I have left at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's great. Now remind me, once you mentioned your complex business, could you tell me about when you started that and how long you owned that company?
That was in my early 40s, and basically had, after I graduated from college, just got pulled straight into the Air Force. The Vietnam War was in full swing. I got a low draft number. I won free flying lessons and a trip to Vietnam. I went in the draft lottery. It took me 6 years out of the system. Well, then when I got out of the military, I came back and just was displaced from my own county and from the community. Hadn't seen anybody for the 4 years of college, 6 years being in the military, so 10 years gone. And really stumbled around for about 5 years. In the early 40s, my wife and I looked at each other and said, we don't have anything, and Social Security is not going to be there for us. So it was at that point we committed to buy a business. We bought a little bitty business, and we probably looked at 50 to 75 businesses. That kept laying a better foundation for the rule, or you always need a yardstick to see what other things are worth by seeing what other things before were worth. Mm-hmm. And so that period of time, just we were looking and looking, and finally we found a little business that was dead on its feet. The oil and gas, I had zero experience at it. I tell people buying a business I knew nothing about. It wasn't the stupidest thing I did, but it's in the top 10. Anyway, at that point we understood that the only thing that's going to make success is grit. You got to have enough mental fortitude and mental toughness to get through every day when everybody else thinks you're going to fail. That's something that I had gotten as I grew up. Mom and Dad were poor, but it was Mom that would kick us back out of bed every day and say, we're going to get up and get moving again. And so that tenacity is the successful thing in life. And really it doesn't matter if you're studying math, if you're in your business, if you're out there in the crowd wondering where you're going to go. If you don't have the tenacity or grit to believe in yourself when nobody else does, you're not going to get where you're trying to go.
Yeah, it's grit shakers. It's I think I heard Gary Vaynerchuk. I'll see if I can remember the quote exactly, but he said he gets a lot of emails from people who get discouraged after working on a startup for 4 months. But quit saying you want to do something for the rest of your life if you're going to give up after just 4 months. It's about the grit, perseverance, and humility and resilience.
Resilience is key. You got to bounce back up. Life, it doesn't matter if you're trying to go into business or if you just live in life, it's going to knock you on your butt every day. And it's that resilience to get back up and go into the game tomorrow. And there are times that I would be so low, and my whole attitude was just get to the next day. Just get to the next day, last through the problems today and tomorrow. It's amazingly clear. The skies are better, and I was a better attitude. So if you let yourself react to emotion, you'll end up quitting more than you'll ever win. And it's never the best, the smartest, you know, that old fable about the hare and the tortoise. Not that I know anything about hares. I mean, I didn't have any since I was young, but you get the rabbit and the tortoise. And so I was always a plodder, but I would never stop. And so I've just proved up that whole fable in my own life that that's not how fast you are, how smart, how good looking. It's just how hard you work and how resilient you are.
Yeah, grit shaker's a key takeaway. So tell me, walk me through quickly how this experience with your first business went until you sold it, and then tell me a little bit about what made you want to get into politics.
Well, the first thing I realized is that I'd always hated sales. As somebody who was always shy and introverted, did not like sales. I didn't even ask the question before I bought the business. We tied up everything. We signed the mortgage on our house over to the bank. And then I realized I'm the only salesman. And so you just all of a sudden say, well, I'm going to like it. I'm going to make myself get out and do it every day. So that was the beginning point. There were weeks and weeks and months and years where we just weren't sure that we could get through. We weren't sure we'd have the cash flow. I'll tell you, our faith was really deep and saw us through a lot of the times. But also we worked hard, my wife and I. She would work the office, I would work the field. I got out and learned the business very fast. You learn really quick on your own money. And she was tenacious in the office, kept everything going straight there. So we ran the business for 14 years. We began to double in size and double in revenues every 3 to 6 months. And so we ended up being about 10 times the size we were. That doubling maybe started about the into the first year, and so we had 4 people when we started, and we jumped to 8, and then to 16, and then to 32 in about 3 years.
Wow.
Now, I'll tell you that growth is harder to sustain than hard times. Hard times you can shrink up. Growth is demanding more management. You got to be finding people with new skills. And so, the growth period, 3 through 6 years, we jumped up almost to 40 to 50 people. And then we literally said, that's enough for us. You can only spend so much money in life. You can either let it pile up or whatever. And that was never our intent. Our intent, my wife and I had our intent every day was to go to a business that we loved going. We wanted to enjoy life and enjoy what we were doing. And the business gave us a perfect opportunity to do that. People would sign on and come with us one at a time, and we didn't have fancy uniforms. Our trucks weren't quite as new, but we could cause people to believe in us and believe in themselves, and that was probably our greatest success. When we sold the business to come to Congress, after I was elected, it was obvious that we couldn't run the business and be here. That was a deeply painful time. I still miss the company. I miss the people that we had built up. We had a great little company with a tremendous vitality to it. People that just hate to use the expression, but we just loved each other. Somebody having trouble, nobody to ask. They just pick up and help them along the way. So in 1999, the price of oil fell to from about 20 down to 6 for our local oil. We lost 80% of our revenues. Every company in our area did. It was nationwide, it was very deep, it was much like what's going on right now. My wife and I looked at each other over the kitchen table and said, you know, we talked to every person into coming here and we can't let them lose their houses. So we went and met with them and said, look, we see what's going on with everybody else, but we're going to keep everybody on the payroll at the rate that you're making now. Truck drivers were working about 70 hours a week. We paid them 70 hours when they weren't working 10 hours. But I told them, come in and do something productive. I want you to understand that these are very difficult times. They'll be over someday, and we're going to fly the company all the way to the ground if we have to. We came within a month of going broke. I told my wife at the beginning, I think of June of 2000, actually sometime in May, that if we don't get work started pretty soon, I said we'll close the company in a month. We had literally run out of cash, out of ideas. It was as if miraculously the work came back a month later, and we're about 3 weeks. We had the only team in place. Everybody was ready. Our equipment was well painted, it was well serviced. People had been working that time, and we charged in and we made back in 6 months what we lost in 12. And so always our mantra as business owners was, if you'll do the right thing, if you'll act with the right heart, then good things will happen to us. And that was a good case. We ran the business for 14 years, and again, probably the ultimate to me as far as what my particular nature in life was.
Wow. What a great story, Shaker. So then tell me what made you want to transition. I mean, obviously there's some factors that we've already covered, but what made you transition into politics and then keep going with it?
As we got into the mature part of our business, about the 10-year point, again, we had it about 14 years, about the 10-year point, maybe a little bit earlier, began to be aware that the government was making it very hard to do what we were doing. And I was looking and thinking, you know, this is what makes America great. My dad and mom had never had a thing to their name. They finally got that little 5 acres. We scrapped on that. Dad's a sharecropper, and yet I can become a business owner. I can go to college. I can learn to fly and go to Vietnam. What a magnificent country. And the government is choking off that capability for other kids to do the same thing. So I began to be worried about the future generations, and so we ran for the state legislature. When we got there, we realized the big issues that were strangling businesses and strangling jobs were coming from Washington. And so we changed our focus. We thought a lot about it. We were in Paris on 9/11, and 9/11 happened with us sitting there. Joe Skeen at that point had had the disease for quite some time. She said that Joe is ready to retire. She said, we need new vitality, we need a business background, we need somebody who's been in combat before because we're moving towards that. She said, I think you should go home and run for the congressional seat, and we did, and we won.
Wow, congrats, that's so exciting. So there's 3 topics, you know, on that note, you know, preventing the government from getting in the way of entrepreneurs, there's three topics I want to quickly go through and kind of ask your opinion on what Washington and you are doing about these things in specific, or just other things that can help entrepreneurs. But let's go ahead and dive right into our first topic of community. One thing that we found that technology has helped entrepreneurs with in 2015 is it's a lot easier to connect with like-minded individuals locally and nationally. And that's a big help to them. Now, I'm sure at some point you met other business owners or mentors or experts that could help you along your journey as an entrepreneur. What can Washington do to help entrepreneurs find communities?
I really think that what Washington needs to do is just get out of the way. I don't think that it's the government's responsibility to help me make my business strong, but it also should not be there trying to do things which disrupt the business. Right now, for instance, in oil and gas, we can't export American oil. And that's something that applied back in the 70s. I was there during the shortages. We had lines strung all the way around the block waiting to get their turn into the service stations. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. The technology has caused us to have an abundance of oil, and the American oil, and specifically New Mexico oil, is selling at a discount because we can't go overseas and sell it. Our oil in southern New Mexico is better than the oil coming from Saudi Arabia. Better than the oil coming from Russia. It would be cheaper to refine, and yet by law we can't sell it. So I think that's a problem for us, that we could, that's an example of what the government should do to open up the doors. As far as the community itself, I think just the most important thing is being aware that the government regulations tend to choke down. Just recently I was in Albuquerque, and so I was there at what used to be Quest, and had several generations of phone companies, and they had a display in the front of their offices. And so I was speaking to the employees, and I said, you know, someone had asked the question about regulation. I said, so you all have the perfect example in this industry. And I said, you've got it in your front as you enter here, so tell me what that is. And nobody. Well, they have a display of phones beginning with those old black cradle phones that we had. Mm-hmm. I tell people that it was a regulated industry, and the most dramatic innovation of my entire youth was when they got extension cords. When I was a kid, I had to sit there and talk to my girlfriend in front of the family. And yet my sister, who is 5 years younger, they had extension cords. She could plug the extension cord, she could carry it and run the extension cord under her door. We still didn't have two phones. That was way in the future. But we had those old black cradle phones. And when they deregulated the phone industry, you've seen this explosion of technology because the government was stopping all of that by allowing a monopoly to take place. And the monopoly was well fed, and it was rich, and it didn't have any desire to push the envelope, and they were doing everything they could do. And as soon as we allowed the shakers into the system, it just exploded, and it's still exploding today. We could do the same thing in every avenue of America, and we would see explosive growth, things that we haven't even considered. And yet the government is grinding away like an old Henry Ford manufacturing facility, a big factory with gears churning. The government needs to be reinvented. It needs to be brought into the current century. Get it out of the way, let it do its regulation, let it keep the water, the soil, our air clean, let it keep people safe, but stop regulating the market to where people can't get into business.
Wow. So much gold there, Shakers. You know, one thing I think that you as an aspiring entrepreneur can take away immediately from this is that for businesses to thrive, you need fewer decision makers, right? One of my first startups in 2012, we brought on like 8 or 9 co-founders. That means 8 or 9 decision makers. That's too many for a company of that size, especially when it's new and fuzzy. And to your point, Steve, I think the government functions as a decision maker when they're regulating.
You're right.
And if we can remove that, we can help aspiring entrepreneurs lower that risk just a little bit in their insane decisions to try it.
And also as an entrepreneur, on that matter of decision making, that is the key. I used to just at lunchtime, my wife and I work together, go to lunch together, we'd eat dinner, anyway, our whole life together, and when by lunchtime I'd say, you decide where we're gonna go, I can't make another decision. And so it's the decision making that will drag you down. So always as a business owner, an entrepreneur, was trying to push decisions down to others. And to get them to shoulder responsibilities. That's where the juice in life is.
Absolutely.
It is not the marching to orders. I was in the military and love that piece of it, but I tell you, the real marrow of life, the stuff that runs through our bones and creates life, is the decision making and the analysis and the guess. And I mean, every day you just don't know. There's not a rule book written on how to do it. But that's where you get the pure enjoyment out of business and life. And for me, again, that's the reason it was perfect, because it made me exercise pieces of me that would have been dormant if I had not been in business.
Yeah, wow. And there's just something there I've got to highlight. You know, we've heard a lot of past Handshaking guests say it's all about the execution. You know, the co-founders need to make those decisions. But Steve right here just said it's important to delegate the decision making. And perhaps, you know, then they can feel they're responsible for their actions. They feel a sense of ownership. And you have to, you know, trust and let go of some control, which is a big step along the journey of entrepreneurship, I think. But just wanted to highlight that. Delegate those decisions.
And I think that too many businesses pull stuff to them, and eventually you just get bogged down. And so I would not give the same attention to a small decision. I might just wave it off and make a decision. Whereas if I give that to someone who is in the organization, then to them that's a pride. They go home and tell their wife at night, I did this, or the wife goes and tell her husband, he just turned me loose with stuff. And I will tell you, I had people, I had a young lady that had she didn't even have college, and yet we trained together on our financial statements, and every month I told her, you know what questions I'm going to ask. You figure out the answers before you get in here. Don't you come in here and make me ask the questions. You tell me before I even ask. And she was giving me master's level analysis of our financials with just high school background, because the two of us worked together. She began to see the moving parts. She had a real adeptness at that. And that's where the real fun for the business owner comes in, watching those people develop underneath you. You see that growth, you see people reaching potential, and at that point, you don't just have money in the bank, you've got a heart full of emotions. And I still have people come to me and say, I would do things that you would get me to do stuff I never believed I could. Maria, she worked for me, and sorry, it was Rosa. And she worked for me, had a heavy Mexican accent. I said I needed her to do something, and she said, Mr. Pearce, I can't do that. I can't. I said, Rosa, you're the only one I got. You're gonna do it. And she says, Mr. Pearce, and this went on for weeks. Finally, she said, okay, I'll try it once. And I said, I'll be right there beside him. I'll sit down. So all day long, she said, Mr. Pearce, you were serious. You're right here with me. I said, I'm gonna be here because I don't want you to fail. I want you to succeed, but I know you can. About 6 months. I mean, she started doing it every day. That was her task then. She came in about 6 months later, about 5:30, when I would show up at the office, and she was not in until 8. She came at 5:30. Mr. Pearce, I've got to talk to you. Okay, let's talk. She said, no in your office, which means it's serious. She was asking. So she pushed the door behind her, and I'm sitting over my desk, and she's sitting there, and she said, Mr. Pearce, I would work for you for free. And I said, Rose, that's not necessary. We'll pay you more if that's what you're aiming. No, you're making fun. And then she said, I told my husband, she said, when I came to work here, I was a chihuahua. You see, now the other girls in the office call me pit bull. She said, you knew I was a pit bull inside, but I didn't believe it. She said, I always wanted to be a pit bull, but it took you to make it, and I would work for you for free. I said, well, go be a pit bull, and we'll still pay you. Anyway, that's what you're looking for as a business owner, entrepreneur. Don't enjoy the whole thing yourself. The ride is fun if you got people along and you're developing folks up and down the organization. You hand off tasks, and you can take on more tasks. You hand away the things that you've learned so well, they're getting a little bit boring. Don't let it become boring. Hand those things to someone else, and you take on the new excitement. That's where the growth in the business is, the expansion. our business just grew so phenomenally. And it was because I was distributing out things that I had learned and was not, and I could tell they were getting flat. So I would just distribute them out and I would go find new things to do. And we're just constantly expanding because of that. And so again, I just urge your budding entrepreneurs to challenge themselves. Don't be content. If you start getting a little bit complacent in the game you're playing, then you haven't distributed it, you haven't delegated well enough.
Yeah. Steve, you have a passion for people. I hope every future Handshaking guest just says the word people as much as you do. That's great. And Shakers, put the emphasis on giving people a sense of ownership in all the decisions that your startup has to make. That's great. So for time's sake, let's move on to the second topic. And in one or as few sentences as possible, how can aspiring entrepreneurs catch feedback from experts that they could typically never get a meeting from?
You know, I really never looked for that. I went to the people in the field. I didn't network well. That was just not my desire. I wanted to go out and run a good business. So we learned it from the ground up. But who I listened to were the people in the field who were doing the work. So if we had we repaired oil wells downhole. Very, very precise art to that. And so I would talk to the people who did it. I would go out and sit on locations. I was, and at one point began to run the job at night because we didn't have anybody else. So I was making sales calls in the day. And then for 12 hours at night, I was running on location. And it's in those points you begin to develop the understandings. If you're not careful, it all stays a little bit antiseptic. Mm-hmm. And your employees can feel when you're antiseptic. They can feel when you kind of, you put on your plastic overcoat so you don't get any splash damage from the employees, and they can feel that. And so I worked the other way. I would get right into the mud with them. Yeah. And we would slug it out together. And so, so I was, I mean, and you're teaching these life lessons, you're living these life lessons every day. So Albert De Leon, at one point, he came over. We were slugging him, throwing big tools. Our tools are heavy, 50 to 100 pounds each. We were throwing those in the shop, he and I together. He stopped and said, "Boss, this is what it's about." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Boss," he said, "this." I said, "I'm still, you're way above my head, Albert." And he said, "This, boss, you come to work at about 5:30 every morning, you stay till 7 or 7 or 8 at night. You're out here in the shop throwing tools with me. This is what life's about." And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." I said, "I run the church on Sundays in case there's some other things, but yeah, that's a good start." And he said, "Well, boss, I didn't ever have a daddy." He said, "I didn't learn that." He said, "I drank up a big part of my life." And he said, "I needed somebody to tell me just this." He said, "I was just confused what life is." So as you're going through your businesses, never forget that people around you are trying to learn those life lessons too. And so don't just be about your business, be about building their character, be about emphasizing the values that make you successful and will make them successful. Because everybody is hungry for that. Everybody knows they're going to work and they're going to make a living, but they're hungry for the real stuff of life. Mm-hmm. And that's what Albert was telling me. This is what life is really about. It ain't out there where the honky-tonks are. It's not out there on the fast lane. It's here plodding along every day. So anyway, just a lot of life lessons.
Yeah, that's powerful. Catch feedback from your team members, Shakers. Don't wear your plastic thing. You're all humans navigating through this crazy journey of life, no matter what part you come into a startup or company. And that's great. You really focus on the employees. I think conscious capitalism, a term.
Yeah, absolutely. Is really coming up. In fact, they've approached me, asked if I would help start a caucus, conscious capitalism caucus here in Congress, and so we're in discussion with those folks to do that. I think that they have made a great statement. Great.
Yeah, let's keep us posted with that. The
Okay,
Shakers and I will be very interested. So let's move on to mentors, but first, Shakers, a word from our sponsors. All right, Shakers, we're back. So, Steve, how should aspiring entrepreneurs go about mentorship in just a few sentences?
Well, again, I'm not a very good example. I literally just put my nose on the grindstone and started to work, and the mentorship was back and forth with the employees and solving the problems every day. I didn't go out much and find out from other people what they did. I had one big mentor that urged me to get out of my shell and get into business, but And so we always talked, but not after I got into the business, because then I was doing what he said I should do. And but my idea of mentorship extends to the people around me. I reach everywhere. I put kids in the planes with me. Somebody from the New York Times wanted to know how was I winning in my district, and I said, I don't know. Why don't you come and ride with me and maybe you can figure out. I said, I never think about that. All I do is work hard and I win. And so the Wall Street Journal, same thing. I just threw them in the car and said, by the way, we'll be back 2,000 miles from now. So I mean, don't think that this is an afternoon joyride. This is hard work. And they stayed with me 3 or 4 days. So we always are mentoring young people. We're always mentoring in the office, sitting down with the interns, and that's, again, where the real juice of life is. But if I really want a new generation, the millennial generation, to run the country properly, then I will spend time with them, and so I do it a lot. I'm constantly amid the millennials. I'm out in young businesses that are struggling and they don't think anybody's ever been there before, and they don't think I've ever struggled, and I can sit down and tell them what their life looks, and they say, you've been reading my mail, haven't you? Anyway, but that's the mentorship, and I'm constantly engaged in that. So again, I welcome your shakers to get out and mentor other people, and they'll find their mentorship there.
Yeah. So last question before we wrap it up. What is one action item that aspiring entrepreneurs can do to help them on their entrepreneurial journey to make sure they get the best information for their startup?
Well, I would have directed it a little bit differently. If I was going to sum all the business rules up into one thing that will create a success, that is to pay your bills on time. If you pay your bills on time, that means you're paying attention to your cash flow. You're not spending too much money. You're aware of how much money is going out, how much is coming in. You're living a very disciplined game. So just learn one rule if you want to be successful. Pay your bills on time. Everything else works out dramatically well. So good luck to you. If I can ever be of assistance, call Matt, call me, or whatever, and we'll sit down and talk you through it.
Great. And Steve, if we want to find you online, where is the best place to find you?
Best place is Facebook, REP Steve Pearce. We're on Twitter. My granddaughter made sure that we have an Instagram account. You can get online. You can email us from our webpage. REP Steve Pearce is our Facebook page, but join up with us. I do some of the posting in there and a lot of the picture taking. Read about half the things that get posted. Many of the things that are very harsh criticisms, I read those.
Well, thanks so much for joining
Handshakin.
Okay. Shakers, we'll see you later.